Hey everyone, welcome to the Dirt Trail Running Podcast. I'm Coach Loretta and I'm here with Coach Lindsay and today's special guest, Dr. Tonya Olson, Doctor of Physical Therapy and expert in all things feet. And so we're super excited to talk about feet with Dr. Olson because so many times that's what we get into trouble with as runners, as ultra runners, especially whether it's racing or whether it's just in your training. I was just telling Lindsay before we got on, I just came back from a run. That's why I have my hat on. It's a nice day in Michigan, but sort of chilly. And I've been dealing with a foot issue for a long time. And so I'm excited to report that I'm doing really well. And I mentioned to Tonya before that I had a small tear in my plantar and some plantar fasciitis, acute plantar fasciitis that came on. And it seemed like I was two steps forward and two steps back, and I kept trying to train through it, and it wasn't working for me. So mid-November, I was working with my amazing physical therapist, Dr. Lisa Elsie, and we decided to pause running and rebuild me. So it's Loretta 2.0 now. But it was talking about this because I think so many people go through this, and I just want to be really transparent. Sometimes we have to stop what we're doing and reevaluate and figure out what we can do to move us forward so that we aren't going back and forth all the time, because that's where I went. I would feel like I was doing well and then I wasn't, and it was really getting frustrating. So we kind of started from the beginning, right? And I had to be able to hop before I could run. So we did a lot of course, things that I'm already doing. I do lots of strength training, but we were started out with a double leg type work, and then we moved to single leg, and then we moved to some hopping. And I've been super, super cautious with my running because cardio wise, fitness wise, I'm in great shape. I've been strength training, I've been cycling to keep myself going. But, so that can be a problem because now I'm like, when I go for a run, I feel like I could run forever, but I couldn't be because my tissue is not adapted and ready for me to do that. And with all of this change has come a change in my gait, which is interesting too. Like I went back to my normal running gait that I probably haven't seen in 5 years, started to return because I could actually move. With all of this work, I've also been working on a lot of mobility with my foot as well. And so with that, all of those things changed and I have all this tissue adaptation going on. So I was starting out with 1 mile a day, and that seemed like it seemed silly that I was celebrating that I ran 1 mile, but I was really celebrating because I have no pain. And then also seeing how long if I do have any issues or discomfort, how long does that return? Quickly does that return and recover? And so today I'm happy to report 3 miles and I felt amazing and I didn't even have to pick
Yay.
up my foot. So.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So big story, and I'm sure Tonya, you hear these kind of stories all the time, but I think it's nice to kind of put it at a personal level because a lot of people are dealing with it. Even if you're doing the right things can happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's good that you shared that story. It's really tempting to just only put your victories out there. But, if you run long enough or if you do anything long enough, you're going to hit some snags, especially if you run and you are challenging yourself. Like the sign, if things pop up, an injury or something, that's often a sign that you're actually trying new things and you're challenging your body in new ways. And so that's a plus. But I always, and I'm sure you've heard this from your physical therapist, interesting because I've been doing this for so long and I see the process. I'm excited when a runner finally gets to the point where they're going to actually take their injury seriously,
Mhm.
because that means we're finally in a space where they have the mental and psychological ability to do what to really break things down. And if you handle an injury properly, it's a silver it's just the silver lining is that if you handle your injury properly, you will end up a better, stronger, wiser runner.
Right.
So no struggle is not without a benefit if
Right.
you have the right mindset and approach it purposefully. But you just described the absolute thing that runners do. Denial is not just a river in Egypt. You just pretend it's not happening.
Right.
For
It
sure.
doesn't mean it's
Yeah.
not happening. But
And
yeah,
my I can't remember exactly the words that Lisa says, but my mind or my body is brilliant and it has adapted to allow me to do it even when
Right.
I was not hurting. Simple things
Yeah.
that come down to walking down the stairs. I didn't realize why I was so st unstable walking down our stairs until she pointed out that, I'm not even, I can't keep my foot down when I st step off of a step, so
Yeah.
wow, I can walk down the stairs now, I could just
Yeah.
kind of all of those things though go together and make running feel amazing again. So now I'm just being super careful as to the, because today I was 3 miles. I it would have easily been 10 if I didn't say I've got to stop at three. So
I
Right.
know. And think about like that's going to translate that ability to cognitively process the risk reward benefit kind of ratio that will pay off at the way that you're training your brain right now through this process will benefit you somewhere down the line. You're going to be running, you're doing a race or something, and you'll realize, holy crap, I think differently. And like, and it's you've created a new superpower for yourself
right,
by being vulnerable and brave enough to admit, okay, I need help. And you sought out the right help.
right,
Hmm.
right,
Somebody
yeah,
who's experienced with runners.
Hmm.
yeah.
That's really critical, right? Because runners, we're all crazy in our own, in a very consistent and predictable manner.
It's so true.
Right? The type of person who's attracted to running, we just have a unique mindset. And if you're not
Mhm.
experienced with working with runners, it's difficult to get into that, to understand the mindset.
Yeah.
Definitely. And so many times, of course, like we just said, like we just push through it because that's what we do best. And sometimes it's really helpful to stop, reevaluate, build back up. So Loretta touched on the plantar issue. What kind of would you recommend if you're having some pain there or to prevent it in general from the start? Like what can be done for plantar specific? Because I think we all have an athlete that we coach that and deals with this.
Yeah, so understanding the tissue itself is critical.
Hmm.
So plantar fascia is non-contractile, like it doesn't stretch. It's made to cre it fascia is made to create stability
Hmm.
and to be kind of a foundation upon which force is generated. And so for one, when your plantar fascia starts to be symptomatic, it has most likely been stressed for a very long time.
Okay.
It's the symptoms are there's a delayed onset to symptoms a lot of the times with plantar fascia. So understanding that, like just because it started hurting today, you have to look at there's a training area, like identifying. So understand that the delayed onset and that tissue, it's like 9,000 pounds per square inch
Hmm.
to from that to tear plantar fascia. And
Wow.
that's really, so it's either trauma where you like stretch it really fast and under a really, really big load, like an accident of some sort, or the constant overload. And
Right.
it's usually so so understanding that tissue and how the symptoms present. But then also you have to figure out what the causative variables were.
Hmm.
Because once you've got plantar fascia symptoms, you just have to, it's going to be a while. It takes a long time to heal as well because there's no blood supply and
Right.
it's constantly being stressed, when you're walking. So this is where it's absolutely critical that you find a person who's experienced with runners and experience with plantar fascia issues specifically, because there are no treatment protocols that are plug and play to to anyone with plantar fascia symptoms. So there's the acute plantar fascia where you're symptomatic, where you're walking. The treatment, the way that you approach that is different than somebody who's just ouchy. When they first get up in the morning, like there's a really large continuum. And so, but understanding the causative variables, it usually has something to do with it. It always has something to do with load.
Hmm.
So did you run on different terrain?
Right.
Did you run on different shoes? It's less likely, like your mobility has been your mobility for forever, but that can be a contributing variable. I see a lot where people will take somebody who doesn't have a lot of ankle mobility, like in
Hmm.
dorsiflexion or lengthen the calf tissue, and then they'll put themselves in a low drop shoe,
Hmm.
which puts that tissue, so that makes that tissue be loaded when it's at end range lengthened. And
Right.
that's the tissue's the weakest. And so understanding that, and so if you can identify those causative variables, for one, you're going to be able to prevent that from happening again. Because a lot of times people get into this re-injury, they just have plantar fascia issues keep recurring because they don't identify the causative variables. And then you can be more specifically addressing those variables as you're going through your recovery and rehab.
Right.
Since, yeah, if you don't know why it happened, you can't fix it
Fix
well.
it. And
Right.
you did touch on it, Loretta, when I was speaking prior to you jumping on here. You touched on the shoe and the zero drop or a low drop shoe. What's kind of your stance on the popular low drop? Who is it for? Who is it not for? Is it for anybody? That type of thing.
So, variety creates strength.
Hmm.
And so, having different heel heights and different flexibilities of or stability of the sole of the shoe is really helpful to create resiliency and challenge tissues in different ways.
Right.
So the most there's a long answer, but I'm going to try to keep it short. The thing that I see the most with in foot care consistently, it's and I have to I need to build a course on this. People who have limited ankle mobility
Hmm.
do not, they need to really understand the extra stress that they're putting on their plantar fascia and their calf musculature by being in a zero drop or a low drop shoe. That
Hmm.
doesn't mean you shouldn't because be in a low drop shoe if you have limited ankle mobility. It just means that's powerful medicine. So
Right.
that would be something that you're going to use in shorter runs, like your shorter, faster stuff, and then you have like a higher drop, basically for the longer the run is. So
Okay.
like, does that make sense? So you've
Yeah.
got your load, if you want the grit, the best variety, and this is just in general, if you've got your, think about a track athlete. What does a track shoe look like? It's like a
No.
slipper.
Yeah.
It's like a piece of fabric with
Hmm.
spikes on the bottom. So super flexible, no support, because when you're running fast, you're up on your toes.
Right.
And you need, so shorter runs, speed work, that's where that zero drop, flexible, let your foot kind of do all the things that it needs to do. And then your middle distance, kind of meat and potatoes like runs, you want to, depending on the terrain and your body size, you like generally a higher shoe that has a little bit more support and a higher drop is beneficial. And then for the longer races or the longer runs, depending on your mobility and what you have, having a shoe that has more support, more stability, and a little higher drop that can put those tissues on slack, which like the calf and the foot is my general recommendation.
Right.
Oftentimes I'll recommend people, especially if they got some ankle mobility issues, or that when they get tired, they just kind of crash in.
Hmm.
Uh, inward, I'll recommend that they switch into a higher drop shoe at the end, like they're running a 100 miler or 200 or something during the last phase of that race. Or
Definitely.
soft terrain. Here's what I've seen in Florida. I'll have a spate of people like this happened a couple of years ago. There was a local 100 miler and there was mud on a good portion of the loop because it's all looped, a lot of loop stuff around here. And a lot of these, I had like almost a dozen runners on Monday reach out and say, "Oh, I'm having symptoms in my calf and my plantar fascia." And I'm like, "Okay, let me figure out what's." So these are people who were in low heel drop shoe. They had ankle, they may or may not have had ankle mobility issues, but they generally trained on flat, stable terrain like roads or packed trail, and then they ended up in a soft terrain. So when they put their foot on the ground, their heels sank into the terrain. And the ones who became symptomatic were the ones who had already been at end range when they're before their foot sunk into the terrain. So if you've got your foot on the ground and your calf is and your plantar fascia are at close to the end range, that like they're stretched out as far as they can, then you add that extra stress by the soft terrain, and now you're kind of getting into that danger zone. So understanding the terrain that you're on, what your mobility is, your body size. A small runner can, wear the shoes are less of like support in the shoe is a lot of times less of an issue.
Right.
But technical terrain, yeah. So kind of understanding, like, I think variety is the thing that I think runners are oftentimes are missing. And then over the decades, that can create a higher level of mobility and strength issues over time.
Yeah, and going along with that, like I love a super shoe because I love running fast and like a carbon speed shoe. Um,
Yeah.
but I've struggled with Achilles issues on my left Achilles forever. And I was only doing like anytime I ran on the road or the treadmill, I just put on Vaporflies because I want to run fast. But then I switched. So now I only do it like when I race or maybe like once every 2 weeks. And then I run in my more supported shoes and my Achilles pain is like so minimal. It's like a
Yeah.
magical. But it's
Yeah.
really hard when we find these like really fun shoes that we want to run in all the time. But I have to realize like my mobility in that ankle is not there to support that at all. So I've chilled
Yeah.
out on that.
Yeah, variety is critical. It builds
hmm
strength. And that's like, Loretta, you're talking about, your strength training. What that does,
hmm
capturing muscles and different ranges of motion. You're building the strength muscles instead of just the type one, which is like the endurance muscle fibers. It's just variety is what our bodies need to stay resilient and strong. And as a physical therapist, like my job is to think decades. Like I'm thinking when I'm making recommendations to a runner, I'm thinking in 20 years, how's this going to play out? How is what we have right now going to be a play out if you keep at it at where you're at in
hmm
20 years? I want you to be a healthy and resilient. So I think freeing your mind and wearing the shoe that's the best for you,
hmm
that somebody else is recommending, unless they have the same foot, ankle, and running style, bodies type, and terrain and that's not happening. So
Exactly.
yeah.
hmm
Anyhow,
I love
try to
that.
keep it short.
So many things that you've said are amazing. My one thing is if I'm listening to this and you're talking about ankle mobility. How do I know what my mobility is, whether it's good or bad? Is there a way I can check that?
Yes, there is. Thank you so much for asking that question. It's very simple. It's called the knee to wall test. You can Google it and find an image. And basically, all you're going to do is, and this is the most accurate because you're loaded. You're
hmm
like your foot's loaded. So you basically stand in front of a wall. You put one foot in front, one foot in front. You stand in a staggered stance, or you can you can do a half kneeling where your back knee is on the ground. And so you put your foot, your toe, your foot, put it, a couple inches away from the wall and bring your knee to the wall. And so keep moving your foot back until you cannot keep your heel down while your kneecap is touching the wall. I don't know if I'm describing that well, but
hmm
bringing your knee to the wall, keeping the loaded heel down, and the general, unless you're there are you want to have 4 inches or approximately a hand's width between your longest toe, and the wall.
Okay.
That's considered like with normal range of motion in the ankle. And you want those to be symmetrical. So Lindsay, you may have a strength or a range asymmetry happening where that
Wow.
left side is less. So you kind of want to be, if you've got that 4 inches and you're symmetrical, that would be considered normal range of motion for the ankle.
hmm
Okay. And if
Knee wall test.
you don't
Great.
have normal range, do you have any quick tips to try to improve your range for
Yeah.
mobile?
So if you have asymmetry. So here's the thing. All runners should have a 2x4 or a ramp in their bathroom so that they can do heel raises where you come up on your toes and then you go down and your heels have to touch a supported surface for this for and while you're brushing your teeth. And that works on balance, proprioception, mobility of your big toe. That is also something to consider. Your big toe you should be able to, the normal range of motion for big toe is 90 degrees. So you should
Wow.
be able to take your big toe that's on the ground and bring it up until it's 90 degrees or perpendicular to the floor. That is considered normal range. Many, the vast majority of runners that I see that have issues with especially their feet and their toes and foot care stuff, they have limited range in the big toe. So don't
Right.
forget your big toe because that changes how your foot moves. Because if your big toe doesn't flex back, and so if you're doing those heel raises, so on my website, Dr. Tonya Foot Care, I have the heel raise protocol free video there. And so it's
Right.
basically when you're brushing your teeth, if you're doing heel raises and you're going through full range of motion, you are doing all the things to treat and prevent injuries in your foot, ankle, calf complex.
I love
That's
it.
really helpful.
And
Yeah.
that's also Dr. Lisa Elsey, who works with a lot of our patients or our athletes, says the same thing.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Doing your brushing your teeth. We're brushing our teeth twice a day. We might as well be doing something. And
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I come from a special ed background and I worked with infants and toddlers, and we
Uh-huh.
always try to incorporate things into the daily routine, right? And so
Yes.
Hmm.
that is part of your daily routine if you're doing it and if you use it. It's not taking you any extra time, but you're
Right.
getting things done.
100%. And that's the same, with adults too, like especially runners, figuring out the best exercise is the one that you're going to do.
Yeah.
Yes.
But just so sometimes you will see just real quick. So sometimes people will they'll talk about heel raises off a step.
Hmm.
If you're doing a heel raise, like, and you have, I guess, that negative space where you're dropping down past neutral out into space, neurologically the exact opposite thing happens. Your brain freaks out and creates tension in that tendon. So
Okay.
you're at the bottom of the heel raise that's on a slant. You need to have your heel touch the ground so that you can actually get that stretching benefit to the soft tissue.
Okay.
Very helpful. Thank
That's a
you.
great tip. So I'm
Hmm.
just going to ask you another thing. One of the things we've kind of delved into a little bit with my particular injury and a lot of athletes that I work with fall in the perimenopause, menopause age, stage of life. And, one of the things that's happening is that when our hormones are off balance, the little niggles, the things that are happening like this with our Achilles and our plantar are just not healing as quickly as they did when we were younger. We ran into this.
Right.
Any thoughts on that?
Yes. And that's just a really good something to just be aware of. It's for everyone as they age. I mean, perimenopause and menopause is the most tragic is the word that's in my mind.
I
Disruptive.
like tragic.
Tragedy to
It's a
our
tragedy.
body. 100%. But it is really much more, but everyone, as you get older, in your 20s, you can get away with anything. And that's the part of like people who've been running since their 20s have been through this cycle. Like every decade, they're realizing that they heal slower and they have to adapt their training. They get new injuries. It's just a process of things. But definitely in that perimenopause, menopausal space, we need to be kind to ourselves and to know that our body is different and you can't strong arm your body into healing or recovering faster. You have to give your body the grace that it needs, the support that it needs, and just realize this is my body now and have that patience. And that's, what you're demonstrating, Loretta, by just taking things down to the foundation. But 100%, it's just so easy to fall into that mindset where you're like, God, I used to be able to do blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? There's a lot of things you used to be able to
Yep.
do you can't that are more challenging now, but there's a lot of stuff that you never could do that you're freaking badass doing now.
Right.
Right.
So true.
appreciating what you've learned and appreciating who the body of work that you are now. But yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely.
And I think the other thing that we get into is a mindset. We work with a lot of ultra runners, and
Mhm.
I feel like we tend to have a higher pain tolerance. So we might
Oh.
ignore these, niggles because, we just have this high pain tolerance and we can get past it.
Right.
Yes. So I'm so glad I wrote this down. I'm so glad you brought this up. This is so fantastic. Okay. And I'm trying to keep it super, super, super short. So physical therapy has led the charge in the research on pain neuroscience, which is
Ooh,
how your neurological system responds to the pain experience, because pain is an experience, it's multifactorial, it's not just a tissue thing.
right.
And so I know some of the leading researchers. I see them at conferences like every year, and I've known them as they've leaned into and created this whole body of research. And so most of the research focuses on hypersensitivity
Mhm.
in people who have low back pain.
Okay.
So it has been proven that somebody who's had low back pain or had chronic pain, their nervous system is hypersensitive.
Mhm.
Like, so what would be a 4 out of 10 for somebody who's never had chronic pain, somebody who's in chronic pain or has had chronic pain, they will experience that same stimuli as like an 8 out of 10.
Okay.
Not because that stimuli is more, but because their nervous system is hypersensitive, like more sensitive. It's kind of like, when you're trying to watch TV in a loud room and you keep turning the volume up. That's
Mhm.
kind of what your nervous system is trying to do. It's like you're not listening to me, so I'm going to turn up that pain experience.
Wow.
And so I actually asked him, Adrian Lowe is his name. I asked him, I said, these ultra runners, like your nervous system and your mentality, your mindset, the whole point to ultra running is to push through and to ignore. Like, if you don't mind, it doesn't matter. That's our mantra, right? And
Right.
so I'm like, Louis, what do you think do you think something different is happening with my ultra runners who honestly don't notice when they're in pain? They don't acknowledge it. They really can't. It's a whole thing. I could have it's a whole talk. And he's like, yeah, it's the same thing. So ultra runners neurologically respond differently than somebody who is not an ultra runner. And then there's also things that happen in your cortex, the motor cortex, like in your brain.
Right.
There's actually like smudging is kind of what happens. Like there's if you've ever heard of homunculus, like there's a discrete place in the cortex of your brain that represents each body part. And when you have been in chronic pain or you're an ultra runner and you cause yourself chronic pain, your neurological system becomes less specific. And so let's say your left Achilles, Lindsay, is supposed to take up a portion of your brain that's the size of Rhode Island.
Mhm.
But because you're in a chronic stimulation situation, your nervous system becomes less sensitive and more generalized. So instead of having that one discrete spot that represents your left Achilles, you'll have a bigger spot like the size of Montana.
Got it.
And so we call that cortical smudging, which means,
Mhm.
so have you guys, now you're probably going ding, ding, ding. Have you had runners that you work with and they can't explain to you? They're like, I think my foot hurts. I don't
Yeah.
know how long it's been hurting. And they're really vague and they just can't explain what's happening very well. That's because they're smudged.
Mhm.
Nervous system is less. I'm like, you're just smudgy, girl. I'm telling you. So understanding that neurological situation, I think it's. I mean, for one, that's where physical therapists kind of belong, working with runners, because we have that high level training, understanding pain neurosciences. But that's a long answer to a short question. You are exactly right.
Right.
It's your neurological system that is reworked and rewired. It's rewiring. And so that's where ultra runners are such an interesting population.
I
Now,
love
along
that.
that same,
That's
that's super
fascinating.
interesting.
Yeah.
But along that
Yeah,
same
I,
line,
I
when
could
we're
go.
like running a long race, I mean, everyone that runs these races will say like, if your Achilles is hurting, just wait a while and something else will take that over. Like, how does that factor into it? Because like eventually I forget about one thing that's hurting and then something else will take its place. Like, are we only able to focus on one massive pain?
Oh my God, you guys are asking the best questions. This is a nerd fest over here. It's amazing. So, oopsie, sorry.
Love it.
That is a fantastic question, and you are 100% correct. Your
Wow.
brain can only digest or report like pain in big pain in one area.
Got
And
it.
this is where you probably have heard of situations where people have been into a car accident and then a couple weeks later, so they were in a car accident and they broke their left leg. And then a couple weeks later, they realized they had broken their right wrist,
Mhm.
but they didn't notice because their brain was like, "Ah, ah, ah." It was attending to the thing that was the most urgent. And
Right.
I've had that happen in the clinic many times where I have diagnosed somebody as having a different injury because like you're just paying attention to the thing that's the most. But that is 100% exactly what happens. Your brain
Wow.
can only manage so much, and it's that neurological stuff. It's so cool. Why
Insane.
Things Hurt is a video to watch on YouTube. um, a, um, Lorimer Moseley is a researcher in Australia, and he really explains that pain neuroscience, the pain experience in a very relatable manner. And it just so happens to be from a personal experience that he had.
Wow.
So if you want a nerd fest, Why Things Hurt, Lorimer Moseley.
Oh, that's
Perfect.
great. So my son
Goodness,
is
great question.
also my son is a biomechanist, kinesiologist, in that field. And
Okay,
for his
yeah.
grad school, what he was doing was testing people with neurological orders, the bottom of their feet to test for foot sensitivity. And he always wanted to
Uh-huh.
get me into the clinic because he was curious what my foot sensitivity would be like after running, hundreds and thousands of
Yeah.
miles. So, yeah, so that was a good
Yeah,
So
conversation.
interesting.
exactly. Yeah, you're smudged.
I love that.
Smudgy.
So I
Oh
think
I
that
yeah, I'm like, girl, you're still smudgy.
yeah, I
I
think
was
we'd
just
be
talking to Loretta
remiss
the
if
other day.
I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about blisters because I think,
Yeah.
so many people are struggling with blisters. Do I tape my feet? What do I put on my feet? Do I layer my feet? Do I do it before it happens? When do I do it? All of those good things. So share your wisdom.
100% prevention is the absolute best approach to anything related to foot care. You prevent problems because never in the history of a blister has one ever gotten better if you ignore it. It's
True.
only going to get worse.
Right.
And so prevention, and understanding like the causative vari the most the causative variable for tissue breakdown on your foot is prolonged exposure to moisture, which is called maceration, or swamp foot. But maceration is when, your 250,000 sweat glands per foot are pumping out sweat and your tissues are getting exposed. And that prolonged exposure, that maceration makes your skin become more fragile and more prone to injury. That's why, like, seriously, your toes have been together your entire freaking life. Why do they only fight when you run 50 miles or
Right.
longer? Right. And that's because of the fragility conferring effect of maceration. So your first line of defense is to prevent maceration by using a skin barrier ointment.
Mhm.
And there's, the ones that I recommend the most like squirrel's nut butter and salty britches are probably the most well known. They're the really high quality products. They're very different products. They're not, they're not competing again. Like there's no competition because they're so very different. So
Mhm.
finding and you choose which one based on the conditions and all the stuff. And so having something that you use to prevent maceration, and then you need to understand your foot. And calluses are information. Calluses tell you where you have concentrated stress to your tissues. And they're also a place where that are callus makes you prone to a blood blister. And so calluses are generally fine in training, but they become a liability when they swell up, get rough, and become more of a friction point. They cause shearing forces when you're in a longer race.
Hmm.
So understanding your managing your calluses, and then knowing if you consistently have tissue breakdown or blisters in certain parts of your foot. Like if you've had a blister in one area, it's likely to happen again.
Hmm.
And so that is where like pre-taping is I generally recommend that if you've had consistent issues or if you've had an issue in a place in the past, go ahead and pre-tape it. Like
Hmm.
it's not hurt anything to have that tissue protected. And so then on a case by case basis, but really protecting from maceration, understanding your foot, and trying things when you're in training,
Hmm.
which is a little difficult because your training runs are not as long as as
Right.
races for ultra running. But having a familiarity, and it's just like anything in ultra running, it's trial and error. But just be informed and do everything you can to be preventive. So prevent maceration, number one, and then protect the tissue at risk, which is either where the calluses are or where you've had tissue breakdown in the past.
Okay.
So, quick question on calluses. Like everyone seems to have an opinion. Do you want them? Do you want your feet smooth? Like, what's the answer there? Like, do you want to keep your calluses?
Yeah, that's a good question. And yeah, so here's the thing, calluses are information. Like I'm a physical therapist, so you can't get in like I'm curious about everything.
Hmm.
So my first question is, why is that callus happening? What
Hmm.
is happening so to me, if a callus is if you have significant calluses, I would like to know why they're happening
Hmm.
and address the variables so that they're not happening, because that's a callus is an indication of higher levels of a concentrated stress in one small area. And
Hmm.
so that's taking away the efficiency of how your foot is moving. And so that can be an indicator like stronger calluses, bigger calluses can be a symptom of something your foot and ankle complex needs something different, a different
Okay.
type of shoe. The shoe you're wearing is not maybe the best.
Hmm.
Um, and so in training, calluses are generally they're protective because they're kind of like a pearl, like like an oyster builds a pearl because there's an area of irritation. And
Right.
so it's thicker skin because there's some pressure there that's happening consistently. And so during training, if your calluses are not a problem, they become a liability when you're doing a longer race. So generally, it's best to reduce the calluses before you run because a callus, when it swells up from maceration, it has a rougher surface and that is more likely to move. And then it creates shearing forces, which is where the callus is moving
Hmm.
against, and it's trapping the dermis between the callus and the bone underneath. And
Right.
that's where you get a blood blister because the dermis is the underlayer of skin that houses the blood vessels and nerves.
Hmm.
And blood blisters are much more painful than a superficial blister that's just the epidermis.
Yeah.
So I generally like it's just because of the liability of blood blisters
Hmm.
and what happens with a callus when it swells. The general recommendation is to be reducing the calluses before your big race, the longer races. And then if you reduce that callus by shaving it down or filing it, you've taken away some of that protective that's the skin that's there to be a protective layer, then you
Hmm.
need to take over it. So if you take a callus off, give your skin a chance. Does that help? Does that helpful? And then
Yeah.
some people, they've got their cat, and then it's just like anything else. Like you live and learn. Like you might find eventually that you don't need to do anything with your calluses, but like have a preventive mindset and look at calluses as a symptom
Got
uh,
it.
or as information, because ideally you have less calluses because
Yeah.
then you're moving more efficiently.
Right.
Great. And then to follow that up, I know there's so many like feet questions. We can go on
Yeah,
forever,
no, it's
but
good.
I've had a lot of luck with toe socks. What's your
Oh
thought on
yeah.
toe socks?
Yeah, so here's the thing. Yeah, so generally, because like I want people to be as efficient as possible with their foot care. And so
Hmm.
dialing things into what exactly you need, not what somebody else is doing, what
Hmm.
you specifically need for your feet. I generally recommend toe socks for anyone who has more, they typically get blisters in more than one toe. So if
Hmm.
they've got two or three toes that consistently get blistered. I'm thinking, doing the math in my head of like the time that you spend pre-taping, the time that you're going to have to spend on the course addressing possibly retaping, ideally not if you do it
Hmm.
properly. Um, and so toe socks are a really good option if you tend to have blisters on your toes or toenail injuries, but then that's a whole nother conversation because the socks can't protect against the pressure that's happening on the toes. But they're worth a try. Some
Hmm.
people love them and it solves all their troubles. Some people they put their toes and it doesn't do a damn thing, and they have to use the silicone toe caps
Hmm.
in addition to the toe socks. But if the toe socks allow you to not have to tape as much, then have at it. Or you just like them. Some people like
I
they
love it.
feel like it helps their toes be more separate.
I like the grip that it gives me. Like I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah. Yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, like try them out. What the
yeah.
heck?
But one thing I have noticed using toe socks consistently is it, of course, makes your foot slightly wider. So I have to make sure I have enough room in that toe box for no rubbing to happen. So I was getting like some rubbing on my pinky, but I've seemed to have adjusted that.
Yeah, because the sock is taking up more space.
Hmm.
And then so here's the thing, like gone are the days where we only had one toe sock to choose.
Hmm.
So there's all different brands.
Yeah.
And like so you could possibly find a brand that's really thin. Like
Hmm.
Injinji has like the hiker toe socks, the
Right.
liners. Like the creepers socks are super, super
Mhm.
thin. So that's the math that you do as well. And then
Yeah.
sometimes you can double up or that kind of thing. Sometimes that toe sock underneath a regular sock. But that's again, some of those you just kind of be informed as to the decisions that you're making. But yeah, I love toe socks.
And then quickly, you mentioned the silicone toe caps, which you talked about in our coaches meeting one time. And I've never used them before, but I think, am I right that Camille Herron has talked about them before?
Yeah, because guess where she heard of them? Guess who she heard about them from?
Is it you?
Yeah, I've known her since I met her 20 at the Lake Sonoma 50 miler, I think
Mhm.
2016. So we've been friends since then, and I've crewed
Awesome.
her. I was head of managed her foot care and the foot care of the Lululemon team for the Further
Awesome.
project a couple
Oh,
years
that's
ago,
awesome.
and that was an experience. We could do a whole not that week. But so silicone toe caps, they protect against pressure that's happening. A
Hmm.
sock and a tape cannot protect against pressure. They
Okay.
can protect against friction, which is where two things are kind of moving on each other.
Hmm.
So the most commonly, it's the big toe or the pinky toe
Hmm.
that will benefit from a silicone toe cap.
Okay.
If you're consistently having pressure issues, like the big toenail is kind of it's just gets beat up and you're getting blood blisters underneath the toenail, that toe cap can often be the cushioning that toe needs. And
Okay.
then if you have the type of foot where your pinky toe is kind of smushed up underneath the toe next to it,
Hmm.
and you can tell if that's happening by if you're after you do a long run, if your pinky toe is triangle shaped, that
Mm.
means it's getting smushed underneath. Now, here's the mistake most people make. They think that's a toe box thing. And more often than not, if that pinky toe is underneath, the toe next to it, that has to do with a mobility and range of motion issue. And those tissues are like as you're running, your tendons and ligaments and soft tissue are pulling your toes together. It's
Okay.
less likely a toe box. 98% of the toe box issues, quote unquote, have nothing to do with the width of the shoe. It has to do with the range of motion of your toes, soft tissue, ankle complex, and that's a
Mm.
whole big
That's
con.
really interesting.
So, but if your pinky toe's getting smushed, that silicone toe cap can be really helpful.
Mm, very
So
cool.
They're
you
definitely
sort
worth
of
a
hit
try.
on touching toenails. So don't hate me, but I have pristine feet for runner. I never
I have
get
great feet too.
never never get blisters. I've never lost a toenail, and to losing a toenail seems to be like the badge of honor for ultra runners, but in my mind it is not. And
Mm.
so I think we should talk about that a little bit. Like why are people getting, losing their toenails? Why are they turning black? I know a lot of times we kind of have talked about people are tending to grip with their toenails and which is causing
Mhm.
some of that. Maybe it has to do with agility that or mobility that they lack, on the trails. Can you talk a little bit about that and why that's happening and why it's not really a badge of honor?
Yeah, can we just normalize not can we normalize not abusing ourselves and thinking it's cool?
Yeah.
Like it's not cool that your toes are injured all the time. That's not
Hmm.
funny. It's not cool. It's not a badge of honor. It
No.
shows that your feet aren't getting what they need and you're
Yeah.
injuring yourself. It's not, and it's not cute. Like,
No.
seriously, I live in Florida. Like, don't be wearing, and don't be taking your paint over those. Like, you got,
Yeah.
the other people are having a look at that. Like, I think
So
there's
true.
something said for being kind to those around you. But
Right.
it's not a badge of honor. It's a symptom. It's like a callus. It's a
Hmm.
symptom that something is not happening properly. And if your feet aren't, if you've got discrete areas of excess pressure so you have skin breaking down because of it, your foot is not moving the way it should be in your shoe, and you're losing your efficiency and it's affecting your performance. And so, Loretta, your feet are the people whose feet are great and they don't have problems. They generally they have the strength, mobility, and all those things that combine so that their foot is when it's on the ground and you're going through your stride, your foot and your toes are doing what they're meant to do.
Hmm.
Yep. Loretta, you brought up the point about strength. So a clear indicator of calf weakness is if you stand on one foot and your toes immediately curl.
Okay.
So toe curling, clawing the ground is an indicator of calf weakness. And a lot of times, I'll just do that as a trick. I'll tell somebody stand on one foot, and if their toes um, crumple or claw, that can be, but it can also be, it's more complicated than that. So if you have strength impairments in your calf and you don't have enough strength, your toes are going to naturally grip the ground, and your toes are not made to be, the end of your toes and your toenails are not designed to be perpendicular to the ground when you toe off.
Yeah.
And that in that the toe, when you toe off at the end of your stride, because that puts perpendicular pressure onto the toenails, and that's the most common like morphology or physical presentation that I see with people, where when their foot is at rest, the ball of the foot joints, if the ball of the foot is lower than your toes, the MTP, or the ball of the foot joints, are frequently are extended. So if your toes are in a claw position at rest, that's an indication that you don't have the range of motion. And when you're toeing off, those toes are being pulled into, because that's a mechanical cause. So
Right.
like the clawing, because you have weakness, is a strength cause, but it's often combined with a mechanical cause. And so your foot hits the ground and your toes, and you have a low drop shoe and you don't have the mobility in your ankle, your toes are pulled into a claw position, and then you toe off on, and your toenails are being squashed with every stride. And so
Hmm.
it's a multifactorial situation, but I definitely, what I see overrepresented in people who consistently have toenail or foot care issues, they have that mobility restriction, and their toes are in a claw position. And then that's like Loretta's was saying, like it's a habit also, like if you that you can train out of. And that's where those heel raises, when you're brushing your teeth, you can be training, you're increasing that range of motion. And if you're paying attention to not letting your toes to claw when you come up, that's like a multifaceted kind of a multifaceted approach to the toenail vulnerability. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
absolutely.
All
great
they want.
description. I
Yeah.
Yeah.
appreciate taking the time to
But you
explain
can,
that.
yeah, like if you take your, sorry, like, so if you take your hand with your fingers straight and your thumb facing towards you, so your elbow
Mhm.
towards the ground, and then, so this is for the listeners, and you bring your hand, the back of your hand back, and so you
Mhm.
kind of cock your hand back, so like you're gonna hold a tray. Look at what happens to your fingers.
Mhm.
Straight, and then they get pulled into being flexed or claw in a claw position or a gripping position. That's what's happening to your toes if
Got
you
it.
don't have the mobility in the foot ankle complex. Every time you put your foot on the ground, those toes just get pulled into claw position.
So
Right.
then the answer for some people are they go to their podiatrist and they have all of their toenails removed. That just doesn't
Oh,
ever make sense to me. So speak to us about
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
oh,
and I get why people do that because so here's, podiatrists are not trained like physical therapists are. They can do invasive interventions, like their podiatry school would be 900 years long if they also included rehab and
right.
what we learn. And so that's addressing the symptom, but it's not addressing the cause. So the symptom is the toenails are being abused and are falling off because they're traumatized every time you take a step.
Yeah.
That doesn't address the cause. And so
Right.
for me as a PT, I think to myself, that's great. You treated the symptom, but what is your foot going to look like in 20 years?
Oh,
right.
yeah.
Like if you're doing, and so I prefer to address like why is this happening?
Yeah.
And so like and have that multimodal. Like if you just, that can be removing the toenails, but that's an incomplete addressing of a problem. But if it works, you know.
Oh, I
Right.
can't imagine.
I can't
But
either.
I had a thought just along like foot care during a race. We all have this idea that maybe we need to change our socks X amount of times. Does it help to change your socks?
Yeah, another fantastic question. You guys are the best. Oh my gosh. Okay, I love this question. So I talked about maceration earlier. You
Mhm.
should time your sock changes with the length of time the skin barrier ointment is effective.
Got it.
So that's where in training you're going to kind of learn, and then you sort of learn over time. Like salty britches, I can generally recommend 10 or 12 hours that where it's going to still be protecting your skin from maceration.
Okay.
A softer product that's like the Swirl's nut butter, that's based in a coconut oil. That doesn't last quite as long under more extreme conditions. But so know how long that product lasts for yourself.
Hmm.
And sometimes you're kind of spitballing it, but the general rule of thumb is like my general rule of thumb is 10 to 12 for salty britches and 4 to 5 for squirrel's nut. There can be massive differences, but if you time, because you want to be efficient and
Hmm.
not dilly-dally. Do not do anything like during a race that is not needed. Being efficient is how you're able to like do better. Like
Right.
that's a big, I'm really just not a fan of like laying around at the aid stations.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the reason. Frequent sock changes just for the sake of changing your socks is
Yeah.
really a waste of time. It's
Yeah.
not efficient use of your time. Change your socks for a reason. And no, and that reason could be, oh, I crossed a river or a
Hmm.
creek and I would like to have dry feet after that. And you're going to
Hmm.
reapply your skin barrier ointment. Or I know that my skin barrier ointment loses effectiveness after about 6 hours. So that's when I'm going to change my socks.
Got it.
And so just
Yeah.
be
It's
intentional and
not
know the
about the sock,
products.
it's about the
Yeah,
barrier. Yeah.
yeah.
Love that.
Great.
That's great information.
Yeah. Hmm.
So
Yeah,
we've
we've touched
covered,
on so many
yeah, we've
things.
touched on a lot of things. Is there anything that we're missing, Tanya, that we should say before we go? I think
All
we could
right.
talk for like a week,
I
but
know.
we probably have to wrap it
100
up.
years. Yeah, oh my God. I love the questions that you guys asked because it allowed me to kind of to answer the things that like I'm not always able to answer so that people can, because my platform is to help people think better, educate folks so that they can make better decisions for themselves.
Yeah.
And your questions really allowed for a bigger conversation
Yeah.
where folks can kind of have that more comprehensive understanding of like, and I think curiosity, like, ultra runners, we're a curious bunch. Like, oh,
Yeah.
how much longer
Like
can
our own experiment.
I
Yeah.
think, well, 100 miler? Well, what if I do 100? Why don't I do a 200 miler? We're always kind of questioning, we're curious, but I would encourage people to be curious about your feet.
Hmm.
And that can really and that can help you come up with answers,
Hmm.
identify the variables that you need to address. But being curious instead of just more often than not, people just they treat their feet like they're like the last thing they consider, which is
Right.
just shocking because you can't run without your feet.
Exactly. I have one more question with like the sock thing. A lot of people like, the sock that comes up to the knee for the calf compression or a separate calf compression. How do you feel about those, like especially during a race?
Did you just crawl into my brain? Such a good question. All right. So, compression on the calf
Hmm.
is for longer races is very beneficial because it reduces the incidence of swelling in your foot.
Okay.
And if your foot is edematous or like is swollen, that and then now the tissue is going to that makes the tissue more fragile. It's taking up more space in the shoe. So during training, the knee-high sock situation, I actually have a video on how to put those on.
Okay.
The trick. The during training, the sock is great, but during races, you're better off with the calf sleeve that stays on, and
Hmm.
then you have the freedom to change your socks as needed.
Got it.
If you're wearing the compression socks during a race and you need foot care, more often than not, we're cutting that off. You're
Yeah.
like, just cut the freaking thing off. Like, I don't have time for this. And that's why I have a shoehorn in my kit too, because a lot of socks are tight. But yeah, definitely the calf sleeves, because you can leave those on. You don't have to mess around. And then you have the freedom to do whatever it is that you need with the sock during the race. And then here's the thing that's interesting, like, um, compression socks should be the first thing you put on after you run a long race. First
Hmm.
thing,
Okay.
before you have the beer or the non-alcoholic, seriously, like
Yeah.
that, you cross the finish line, you take your socks, when you take your shoes off, you put your compression socks on
Hmm.
because that helps with recovery. That is should yeah, everyone should have and then especially if you're flying to a race, you should have compression socks if it's a flight more than 4 hours, because cankles just aren't a good look.
No.
They're not helpful to a runner to go
Definitely.
into a race with cankles.
Do you have
Definitely.
recommendations for compression socks and sleeves a brand
There's
or?
a lot of brands. So I'm 20 years ago was my first ultra. So I still have there's probably 100 other brands by now, but like the Zoot were
Hmm.
my first ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's tons of brands. You want to have the higher compression, like the 20 to 30 millimeters of mercury, like the whatever ones that they call the extreme
Yeah.
or not the daily ones.
Got it.
Those are the best for sure.
Okay. Super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Tanya, will you share how people could work with you or learn more from you? You have a site, you have a book. Can you share a little bit?
Yeah. Well, we've got, Fixing Your Feet, the book. Now, mind you, that issue is a number of years old,
Hmm.
and things are very different now. So I think the most current resources are on my Instagram account, and my YouTube account. I have like little 2, 3 minute videos on there. But my most recent development has been drtanyafootcare.com.
Hmm.
And I'm shifting over, adding free content there and paid content. That's the plan for 2026, is to find me
Nice.
there. And I never mind if people reach out. Instagram is probably the best place to message.
Yeah.
I don't never mind. And if you're going to ask me a foot question, especially if it has to do with blisters send me pictures, because that's the first question. You say,
So
well, I
she
need
likes those pictures. Those
well, I can't, that's how I diagnose. I
Yeah.
can see, I can look at a foot and I know where your problem issues just based on how your foot looks. But yeah, I mean,
Oof.
I can't advise about a blister accurately if I don't see the blister itself, because I see a lot more than just a blister. I see all the things.
Yeah, I love it.
Wow, I love your questions. Can we do this again?
Yes, I
Yes,
think we
we
should.
could go on for hours. So yeah, I'm sure we'll be taking notes for the next round.
Yeah. But yeah, watch that video, the Why Things Hurt with Lorimer Mosley, for that pain
So
neuroscience. It really
fascinating.
helps. It's super, it's a really, yeah, I think that's the next, what's like the new frontier, like in ultra runners, is understanding that that pain experience, the
Right.
pain neuroscience part of it, and applying it really is going to be, well, it is powerful in the runners that I work with, but
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well,
great
thank you.
question. Amazing.
Well, thanks for
Love it.
joining us. It was a great show, and I'm sure that a lot of people can walk away with tons of nuggets that they can put in
Yes.
their toolbox for racing. That's going to help.
Yeah, hopefully we planted lots of seeds of knowledge.
Yes.
Curious, my friends.
All right.
Yes. Thank you
Bye.
so much. Bye.
Bye bye.